You have been doing everything right. You walk when the weather cooperates. You watch your portions. You take your medications every single day without fail. And somewhere in the last year or two, your legs started telling you a different story. Getting up from a chair takes a little more effort than it used to. The stairs feel steeper. Your balance feels slightly less certain in the dark hallway at night. And not one person in your doctor's office has sat down with you and explained why. I want to talk to you today about something that has almost certainly never come up in any of your medical appointments. Not last visit, not the visit before that, probably not ever in your life. It is not your medications. It is not how much you exercise. It is not simply your age. It is what you drink. Now, I do not mean alcohol specifically, though we will get there. I mean the drinks that millions of people over 60 reach for every single morning and afternoon, completely convinced they are doing something healthy, or at the very least harmless. The zero-calorie soda you switched to when your doctor mentioned blood sugar. The sports drink sitting in your refrigerator that you sip while working in the yard. The evening glass of wine you have genuinely earned after decades of showing up for your life. Think about how many times you have reached for a drink today alone. 4 times. 5 times, 6. Every single one of those moments is either helping your legs or quietly working against them. And almost nobody has told you which is which. A study published in BMC Geriatrics in 2024 followed older adults and measured something that stopped me when I read it. Researchers found a direct, measurable connection between what people chose to drink every day and their risk of developing sarcopenia, which is the medical name for the progressive, silent loss of muscle that steals strength and function from your legs before you fully realize it is happening. Adults who consistently made better beverage choices had their odds of developing this condition reduced by as much as 90%. 90%. Not from changing their exercise, not from taking a new supplement, from changing what was in their glass. And yet nobody in mainstream health media is explaining this clearly. Every channel tells you about vegetables and fruits and supplements. But the thing you pour into your body multiple times every single day, that piece of the puzzle is almost never discussed honestly. Today, I am going to change that. In this video, I am going to walk you through 7 specific drinks. 3 that clinical research connects directly to the kind of leg weakness that makes walking harder, balance less reliable, and independence more fragile after 60. And 4 that the published science shows can genuinely begin to reverse that process, some of them within just a few weeks. I want you to stay with me all the way to the end of this video, because the #1 drink on the protective list works through a biological system inside your own mouth that almost no doctor ever discusses. And once you understand how it works, you will never think about what you drink the same way again. I also want to tell you about a morning habit that most people over 60 believe is completely harmless. Millions of people have done it for decades without a second thought. And research has found it is quietly blocking one of the most important biological pathways responsible for the strength in your legs. If you do this every morning, you need to stay in this video. Before we begin, tell me one thing in the comments below. How old are you, and what is the very first thing you drink every morning? I read every single comment personally, and your answer may help someone else who is watching this video right now. Now, let us start with the 3 drinks that are working against you. And I am counting up from the least damaging to the most. Because by the time we reach the top of this list, I think you are going to be genuinely surprised. Here is where we begin. Picture the last time you stood in the beverage aisle at the grocery store, looking for something better than regular soda. Maybe you reached for the zero-calorie option, the one without any sugar, the one that seemed like the responsible choice after everything you have heard about blood sugar and weight and all of it. Millions of people over 60 make exactly that choice every single day. And that drink is the 3rd on our list of 3 you need to stop. Diet sodas and zero-calorie artificially sweetened beverages. And the reason they belong on this list has nothing to do with the cancer warnings you may have heard in years past. That alarm has been largely debunked at the amounts people actually consume. The real problem is something far less dramatic, far more hidden, and far more directly connected to why your legs feel the way they feel right now. The problem starts inside your mouth, before you even swallow. Most people have heard of the gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living in your intestines that researchers have connected to almost every aspect of human health. But there is a second community of bacteria living specifically in your mouth, right now, today, that almost nobody discusses. Scientists call it the oral microbiome, and this community performs a function that is absolutely essential to your leg strength. It is not digesting food. It is making nitric oxide. Here is how this works. When you eat vegetables with real color, anything leafy or deep red or purple, those foods carry dietary nitrates. Your body cannot convert those nitrates into the biologically active nitric oxide it needs on its own. It requires specific bacteria living in the back of your mouth and on the surface of your tongue to perform the first critical step of that conversion. Those bacteria transform dietary nitrates into nitrites, which then travel through your bloodstream into your muscles, where they become nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is the molecule that tells your blood vessels to relax and widen, allowing blood to flood into your muscles carrying oxygen, nutrients, and everything a working leg muscle needs to contract, recover, and stay strong. When those oral bacteria are disrupted, that entire pipeline breaks down. The nitrates from your food never fully make it through. Your muscles get less blood flow, less oxygen, and less of the molecular signaling they depend on to stay strong and functional. And the disruption happens quietly. You do not feel it happening. You just feel your legs a little heavier than they used to be, a little slower to respond, a little less yours. Now here is the study you need to know about. In 2023, a major research cohort called the Cardia study, published in the International Journal of Obesity, followed over 3,000 adults across 25 years. Researchers found that long-term consumption of aspartame and saccharin, the two artificial sweeteners found most commonly in diet sodas, was directly associated with significantly greater accumulation of intermuscular adipose tissue. That is, fat depositing directly inside the muscle itself, between the muscle fibers, in the legs and throughout the body. And this association held even after the researchers fully adjusted for total caloric intake and overall diet quality. I want you to pause on what that means for you specifically. You are not just talking about weight visible on the outside. You are talking about fat quietly working its way between the actual fibers of the muscles in your thighs and calves, the muscles that drive every single step you take. That type of intramuscular fat is one of the most reliable markers of the progressive muscle decline that researchers have directly connected to falls, disability, and loss of independence in older adults. Now, an important note. The Cardia study followed younger adults, starting in their mid-20s, over 25 years. The participants were not seniors when the study began, but the biological mechanisms it identified, the relationship between these sweeteners and fat accumulation inside muscle, operate the same way in aging bodies. And after 25 years of daily diet soda drinking, many of those participants are now in their late 40s and early 50s, and the effects the study measured have been compounding the entire time. Here is what most people get completely wrong about switching from regular soda to diet. They believe the swap is automatically better because the calories disappear. And for short-term blood sugar control, there is a reasonable argument for that. But laboratory research published in Frontiers in Microbiology in 2025 found that synthetic sweeteners like sucralose and saccharin significantly reduced microbial diversity in gut communities and enriched potentially harmful bacterial families that drive chronic low-grade inflammation throughout the body, including inside muscle tissue. The researchers noted this was laboratory research, and further human studies are needed, but the mechanism it identified, the way these compounds alter the microbial environment that your muscles depend on, aligns with what multiple other research groups have found. Here is what most people get completely wrong. They drink diet soda for years and see no immediate consequences, so they assume there are none. Muscle decline at this level does not announce itself with pain or obvious warning signs. It happens the same way the aging process works in general, quietly, gradually. And by the time it is obvious enough to be undeniable, it has been building for a long time. The practical guidance is this. If you are drinking one or more artificially sweetened beverages every single day, reduce to no more than 3 per week at most. Replace those occasions with sparkling water and a slice of lemon or cucumber, or plain cold-brewed herbal tea with no additives. And here is the specific piece almost nobody tells you. When you eat nitrate-rich foods like spinach, arugula, or beets, do not use antibacterial mouthwash within an hour of eating them. Your oral bacteria need to be active and present to complete the nitrate conversion that feeds your muscles. That is a detail that costs you nothing to change, and could be quietly meaningful for your leg strength over time. Within 2 to 3 weeks of consistently reducing these beverages, many people notice that their legs feel marginally less heavy in the morning. Not dramatically, not immediately, but the slow upward pressure of that inflammatory environment begins to ease. And as we will discuss later in this video, replacing that drink with one specific option I have not mentioned yet can make the shift even more significant. But the next drink on our avoid list is something that millions of seniors have been sold specifically as good for their active lifestyle. It is in refrigerators and gym bags and golf bags across this country right now, and the mechanism it uses against your leg muscles is more direct and more immediately reversible than anything I just described. Picture this. You just finished a walk around the neighborhood, or a round of golf, or an hour in the garden, and you reach for a brightly colored sports drink because you read somewhere that electrolytes are important, or because your grandchild drinks them after soccer practice, or simply because the label says it is designed for people who stay active. That drink is the second on our list. Commercial sports drinks containing high fructose corn syrup and artificial additives. And I want to be completely honest with you before I explain the science. These drinks were designed for elite athletes performing intense physical exercise for 60 minutes or more at a stretch. Football players in summer heat, marathon runners at mile 20. Under those specific conditions, in those specific bodies, the research supporting sports drinks is reasonable. The athletes are burning through glycogen and electrolytes at rates that genuinely require rapid replacement. You are not that athlete, and your body at 65 or 70 or 75 is not that body. For the average person over 60 who uses these drinks to stay hydrated while gardening, walking, or playing golf, the primary active ingredient is not electrolytes. It is high fructose corn syrup. And what that specific type of sugar does inside the aging body is something the label will never tell you. When you consume a standard sports drink, you introduce a rapid flood of fructose into your system. Unlike glucose, which every cell in your body can process directly, fructose must first go to your liver. When the liver processes large amounts of fructose quickly from liquid sources without any fiber to slow absorption, it converts significant amounts of that fructose into uric acid as a metabolic byproduct. And here is where this connects directly to the muscles in your legs. Elevated uric acid in your bloodstream is not just a problem for people with gout. Uric acid specifically inhibits an enzyme called endothelial nitric oxide synthase, the enzyme responsible for producing nitric oxide in the cells lining your blood vessels. When that enzyme is blocked, your blood vessels cannot dilate the way they need to. Blood flow to your working muscles becomes restricted, and the legs that are already fighting against age-related decline now have to work harder, with significantly less fuel delivery every single time you move. Research examining the relationship between fructose and inflammatory signaling found that chronic fructose exposure specifically elevates inflammatory markers within skeletal muscle tissue itself, including interleukin-1 beta, interleukin-6, and tumor necrosis factor alpha, not general systemic inflammation. Inflammation specifically inside the muscle fibers of your legs. Think about what that means in practical terms. You are drinking something after your walk, something you grabbed because you were trying to do something good for your body, that is telling the muscles in your legs to mount an inflammatory response. Not the adaptive, healing kind of inflammation that makes muscles stronger, the chronic, destructive kind that works in direct opposition to what your aging body is trying to accomplish with that movement. The sodium content makes it worse. A standard 20-ounce sports drink contains between 270 and 360 milligrams of sodium. For a young athlete sweating heavily for 2 or more hours, that replacement has real merit. For a senior with any degree of blood pressure concern, and nearly 65% of adults over 60 have hypertension, according to the American Heart Association, that sodium load puts additional pressure on cardiovascular systems already working hard to maintain adequate circulation to those leg muscles. Here is what most people get completely wrong about hydration and sports drinks. They believe water plus electrolytes must automatically be better than water alone. But your body at rest or during moderate activity does not have a deficiency of electrolytes or fast-acting carbohydrates. It has a deficiency of plain, clean hydration. The answer to that deficiency is water. Just water. For every situation in your daily life, that does not involve sprinting continuously for 60 minutes. Water and a piece of whole fruit replace everything a sports drink provides, without the fructose load, without the pro-inflammatory cascade, without the sodium surge. The practical change is simple. Finish whatever sports drinks are in your refrigerator. Do not replace them. On days when you know you will be physically active in heat and you want an electrolyte source, put a 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt and a squeeze of lemon into 16 ounces of cool water. That replaces actual sweat-lost electrolytes without any fructose chemistry working against your muscles. Eat a small banana or a handful of dried apricots alongside plain water after exercise to naturally replace glycogen and potassium. Within a week of removing commercial sports drinks from your routine, many seniors begin noticing that the low-grade heaviness or aching in their lower legs and knees, the kind they had attributed to arthritis or simply getting older, begins to soften. Not disappear, but soften. That is, the fructose-driven inflammation beginning to ease its grip. What we have covered so far involves drinks you may have already suspected were not ideal. But the #1 drink on this avoid list is something most people over 60 consider one of their most deserved daily pleasures. And I want to approach this one with real care, because this is not a lecture. This is something I want you to hear from a doctor who genuinely wants your legs to carry you to the places that still matter most. After 35 years in internal medicine, I have had this conversation more times than I can count. Someone in their late 60s or early 70s who has done everything reasonably right. They walk, they watch what they eat, they take their medications faithfully, and they mention almost in passing that they have a glass of wine most evenings, sometimes 2, and they say it the way people say things they are already preparing to defend. A small smile, a slight readiness for disagreement, and I used to not push back, but the research has changed what I believe needs to be said honestly. Regular evening alcohol, specifically 1 to 2 drinks consumed 4 or more evenings per week, is the #1 drink on our avoid list. And the reason it belongs at the top of this list is not about liver damage or addiction or any of the risks you have already been told about many times. It is about a window that opens every single night while you sleep, and what regular alcohol quietly does to close it. Your leg muscles repair and rebuild during sleep, not as a metaphor. Literally and biochemically, the muscles in your legs perform the majority of their cellular repair work during the first hours of deep sleep, through a process mediated by a molecular pathway called mTOR, mechanistic target of rapamycin, which acts as the master regulator of muscle protein synthesis in your body. When mTOR is active during sleep, your body takes the protein you ate during the day and uses it to repair micro-damage in muscle fibers, maintain muscle mass, and respond to whatever physical demands you placed on your legs that day. Alcohol, even at moderate doses, suppresses mTOR activity. Research has consistently shown that alcohol directly inhibits the anabolic signaling cascade that drives overnight muscle protein synthesis, meaning the repair work your legs are scheduled to complete between midnight and 4 in the morning is partially blocked. You wake up and feel rested. What you cannot feel is that your muscles quietly rebuilt less than they were supposed to. There is a second mechanism, and this one is particularly significant for people over 60. Alcohol suppresses the natural nighttime surge of human growth hormone that occurs in the first cycle of deep sleep. In younger adults, growth hormone has many roles, but in adults over 60, one of its most important remaining functions is supporting the maintenance of lean muscle mass in the lower body. Research has found that consuming alcohol in the evening can meaningfully reduce the normal nighttime growth hormone pulse. Over months and years of regular evening drinking, the cumulative effect on muscle maintenance in the legs is gradual, measurable, and difficult to reverse. Now, an important note about the research here. A large-scale UK biobank study published in Calcified Tissue International in 2023, which followed nearly 200,000 adults, found that the relationship between alcohol consumption and muscle mass was most pronounced at very high levels of intake. The study also found no clear association in its longitudinal analysis over time. This is honest science, and I want to give it to you honestly. The strongest case against regular evening drinking for leg muscle health comes not from any single population study, but from the well-established biological mechanisms I just described. The suppression of mTOR, the reduction of nighttime growth hormone secretion, the activation of myostatin, a protein whose specific biological job is to prevent and limit muscle growth. All three of these pathways are reliably affected by alcohol in ways that compound quietly over years of regular use. And here is the part I need you to really sit with. If those pathways are even partially suppressed 4 or 5 nights every single week, over the course of 2 years, or 3 years, or 5 years, the difference in your leg muscle maintenance is real, not dramatic from any single night, cumulative across hundreds of nights. I know this is genuinely difficult to hear. The glass of wine at the end of the day is not just a habit. It is a transition, a ritual. It marks the line between the day's demands and the evening's rest. And it is, in the real language of real life, a daily pleasure you have earned. I am not here to take that from you. What I am here to tell you is this. If your legs have been feeling weaker, heavier, or less responsive over the past 2 years, and you are drinking regularly most evenings, those two things are likely connected. You deserve to know that. The decision of what to do with that information belongs entirely to you. A practical approach that many of my patients have found genuinely manageable is reducing evening alcohol to 2 evenings per week rather than daily, while keeping those occasions to a single drink. On the evenings you choose not to drink, replace the ritual with something that preserves that transition feeling. A warm glass of tart cherry juice concentrate mixed with sparkling water works beautifully for this. And as I will explain shortly, it actually supports the overnight muscle repair process that alcohol was partially blocking. The ritual stays, the legs benefit. Within 6 weeks of this kind of reduction, many older adults begin noticing that the morning stiffness in their legs, specifically those first 5 to 10 minutes after getting out of bed, begins to ease. That stiffness has a cause. It is your muscles coming out of a partially incomplete repair cycle every single morning. When you give that cycle the space it needs, your legs begin to feel like they belong to you again. Now, we have spent real time understanding what is working against your legs, and I want to turn that entirely around, because the next 4 drinks I am going to share with you are working in your favor, and the research behind them is genuinely exciting. Before that, if you are finding this useful, please take 5 seconds and hit the like button and subscribe right now. Because the number 1 drink on the protective side of this list works through a biological system inside your own mouth that most doctors never discuss, and I want to make sure you are here for it. Think about the last time your legs surprised you. Not in a bad way, in a good way. A moment when you moved with more ease than you expected. When you got up from a chair without that familiar gathering of effort. When you walked up a flight of stairs and thought, actually, that was fine. Maybe it was years ago. Maybe you remember it clearly. That feeling is not gone. It is waiting for the right conditions to come back. And the first drink that can begin creating those conditions is tart cherry juice. Specifically, Montmorency tart cherry juice. That is a variety name, not a brand, and you can find it in most grocery stores as a concentrate or ready to drink. Before I tell you the science, I want to be honest about something. Tart cherry juice will not rebuild your leg muscles by itself. Nothing you drink will. What it does, and what the clinical evidence shows specifically and clearly, is address one of the most stubborn barriers to muscle recovery in adults over 60. That barrier is chronic, low-grade inflammation. By the time you are in your 60s, inflammation is no longer something that shows up dramatically with a fever or a swollen joint. It has become a constant background condition, a low, persistent biochemical hum throughout your body that quietly slows recovery, reduces the sensitivity of muscle cells to anabolic signals, and contributes to the joint pain and morning stiffness that most seniors have come to accept as simply part of getting older. Tart cherries contain the highest concentration of anthocyanins of almost any food on the planet. Anthocyanins are the deep red and purple pigments responsible for the fruit's color, and they function in the human body as extraordinarily potent natural inhibitors of 2 pro-inflammatory enzymes called COX-1 and COX-2, the same enzymes that aspirin and ibuprofen target. But unlike those medications, tart cherry anthocyanins do this without affecting the stomach lining, without raising blood pressure concerns, and without the other downstream effects of long-term anti-inflammatory drug use. A randomized controlled trial published in the journal Nutrients in 2019, conducted at the University of Delaware by researcher Xiao Chai and her colleagues, enrolled 37 men and women between the ages of 65 and 80. One group consumed 480 milliliters of Montmorency tart cherry juice daily for 12 weeks. The other group consumed a matched placebo drink. At the end of 12 weeks, the tart cherry group showed a statistically significant reduction in C-reactive protein levels compared to the control group. Within-group analysis showed a 25% numerical decrease in C-reactive protein over the 12-week period. Think about what that means for the muscles in your legs. C-reactive protein is not just a number on a blood test. It is a direct measure of the biochemical environment your muscle fibers are living in every single moment. High levels mean your muscles are working against a current of molecular signals that favor breakdown over repair. Lower levels mean a more favorable environment to recover, maintain strength, and respond to the physical demands you place on your legs each day. The same research group also published a randomized controlled trial in Food and Function in 2018, showing that the same 12-week protocol of 480 milliliters of daily Montmorency tart cherry juice produced significant reductions in systolic blood pressure and LDL cholesterol in older adults aged 65 to 80. Those cardiovascular improvements mean better circulation to the legs, which compounds the direct muscle benefit. But the sleep connection is where tart cherry juice becomes something genuinely special for the overnight muscle repair window we discussed earlier in this video. Tart cherries contain melatonin, tryptophan, and specific polyphenols that research has shown improve sleep quality and duration. Better sleep means more uninterrupted time in the deep stages, where that mTOR muscle repair pathway we discussed runs most effectively. Here is what most people get completely wrong about tart cherry juice. They buy commercial bottled cherry juice from a supermarket that has been diluted, heavily sweetened, and heat processed in ways that strip most of the active anthocyanin content. Some of these products contain more sugar per serving than a cookie. The clinical research was done with specific Montmorency tart cherry concentrate, not with cherry-flavored beverages containing 5% fruit juice and added syrup. Here is exactly how to use it. Look for Montmorency tart cherry concentrate at a health food store, at Costco, or online. 1 to 2 tablespoons of concentrate mixed into 8 ounces of water is the approximate therapeutic amount used in the clinical research. Drink this twice per day, once in the morning and once about 1 hour before bed. The evening dose is specifically timed to support the sleep quality improvement that feeds back into overnight muscle repair. If you prefer the ready-to-drink version, look for unsweetened Montmorency tart cherry juice, where the only ingredient is tart cherry juice. It should taste tart, not sweet. That tartness is the anthocyanin content speaking to you directly. Within 3 weeks of twice-daily tart cherry juice, what most seniors notice first is not their legs. It is their sleep. They fall asleep more easily. They wake less often in the night. And then, around week 3 or 4, they notice that getting up from the couch or standing after breakfast has slightly less of that stiff, resisting quality in their legs. That is the inflammatory environment beginning to shift. And the next drink works through a completely different mechanism, one that goes deeper into the cells of your muscles than anything inflammation can reach. There is something happening inside the muscle cells of your legs right now that has nothing to do with how much you move or how much protein you eat. It is happening at a scale so small you cannot feel it directly. But the cumulative effect is something you feel every single day as fatigue, heaviness, and the sense that your legs just do not respond the way they once did. Your mitochondria are aging. Not dramatically, not in a way that announces itself. Quietly and gradually, the tiny energy-generating structures inside every muscle cell in your body, the organelles that convert food and oxygen into the actual mechanical energy that moves your legs, are becoming fewer in number, less efficient, and slower to respond. Mitochondrial decline is one of the most fundamental mechanisms of muscle aging, and it receives almost no attention outside of research laboratories. The drink I want to tell you about works directly on this process. It is matcha green tea, and the reason it works is rooted in a compound called EGCG, epigallocatechin gallate, which is the primary bioactive catechin in green tea, and one of the most studied plant compounds in aging science. EGCG activates a protein inside muscle cells called AMPK, adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase, which acts as the master energy sensor in your cells. When AMPK is activated, it triggers a cascade of effects, one of the most important being the activation of PGC1 alpha, a protein that specifically promotes the production of new mitochondria in muscle tissue. More mitochondria means more energy production capacity. More energy production capacity means legs that feel less tired, less heavy, and more capable of responding to what you ask them to do. A study published in Nutrition Journal in 2023, conducted at Kyoto Prefectural University in Japan by researcher Mizuho Shigeta and colleagues, examined what happened when participants consumed a matcha green tea beverage twice daily during a resistance training program. The matcha group showed significantly moderated fatigue responses after exercise, greater improvement in muscle mass over 12 weeks, and favorable changes in gut microbiome composition that correlated with improved muscle adaptation. This research was conducted in younger, healthy men rather than older adults specifically. I want to be transparent about that. But the biological pathways involved, specifically the EGCG activation of AMPK and PGC1 alpha, are well established as mechanisms that apply across age groups, and are, if anything, more significant in aging muscle where mitochondrial decline is more advanced. Additionally, research published in a Science Direct study found that EGCG reduced the expression of myostatin in aging muscle tissue through a specific regulatory pathway involving a microRNA called Myr486.5p. Myostatin is the protein whose specific biological job is to limit and prevent muscle growth. Aging raises myostatin naturally. EGCG appears to counteract that in a measurable way. This finding was demonstrated in animal models, not yet in large human clinical trials, so the clinical translation needs more research. But the mechanism is real, and the direction is consistent. Here is what most people get completely wrong about green tea and matcha. They buy a commercially prepared bottled green tea from a supermarket that contains a fraction of a percent of actual EGCG content, along with added sugar, natural flavors, and preservatives that further dilute whatever bioactivity remains. The research was done with real matcha powder, prepared in a specific way. Here is exactly how to prepare it. Purchase ceremonial or culinary-grade matcha powder. The color should be a vibrant, vivid green, not olive or yellowish, which indicates oxidation and loss of bioactive content. Use 1 teaspoon of matcha powder. Sift it into your cup to remove any clumps. Add 2 ounces of hot water at approximately 170 degrees Fahrenheit, not fully boiling, because boiling water degrades the catechin content meaningfully. Whisk in a rapid W motion for about 30 seconds until the surface is frothy. Then add 6 to 8 ounces of warm water, oat milk, or plain warm milk. Drink this once daily, ideally in the morning, approximately 1 hour after breakfast. On a completely empty stomach, matcha can cause nausea in some people. 1 hour after a light breakfast is the sweet spot. One practical note: matcha contains caffeine, more per serving than coffee when you measure by the amount of liquid consumed. The presence of L-theanine in matcha modulates how that caffeine affects your body and tends to produce alert focus without the jittery quality of coffee. But if you are caffeine sensitive or take medications that interact with stimulants, speak with your physician before adding daily matcha. What you will notice from consistent daily matcha is not a dramatic overnight change. It is more like a gradual lifting of a persistent baseline fatigue in your legs over 4 to 6 weeks. The kind of tiredness where your legs begin to feel weighted after 2 hours of activity. That sensation, which comes from mitochondrial inefficiency and the muscle's inability to keep pace with energy demand, begins to shift. And the next drink works through a pathway that connects everything we have been discussing, through an organ most people never associate with their leg strength at all. Something is genuinely different about the gut of a 70-year-old compared to the gut of a 40-year-old. Not just digestion, not just regularity. The difference that matters most for your leg muscles is the population of bacteria living there. As we age, the gut microbiome loses diversity. The beneficial species that produce short-chain fatty acids, the molecular signals that regulate inflammation, repair the gut lining, and communicate with distant tissues including muscle, diminish. And in their place, more inflammatory, less metabolically helpful species tend to take over. This is what researchers now call the gut-muscle axis, one of the most important and most underexplored frontiers in the biology of healthy aging. The drink that works directly through this axis is kefir. Traditional dairy kefir, which is a fermented milk beverage produced by a complex community of bacterial and yeast species. Kefir is meaningfully different from yogurt in a way that matters for its effect on aging muscle. Where yogurt typically contains 2 or 3 bacterial strains, traditional kefir is produced by a community of somewhere between 30 and 60 distinct bacterial and yeast species. This microbial complexity is clinically significant. A randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial published in Nutrients in 2025 examined what happened when participants supplemented with a postbiotic formulation derived from Lactobacillus kefiri, one of the primary bacteria found in kefir, combined with complementary proteins over 12 weeks. The kefir-derived group showed a significant increase in dominant hand grip strength, meaningfully elevated circulating levels of irisin, which is a muscle-secreted hormone with broad anti-aging effects, and simultaneously reduced levels of interleukin-1 beta, one of the primary pro-inflammatory cytokines that drives muscle protein breakdown in older adults. I want to be transparent about this study. The intervention used a postbiotic formulation derived from kefir bacteria, combined with additional proteins, rather than plain kefir alone. The research on plain traditional kefir is somewhat earlier stage for muscle outcomes specifically. However, the broader gut-muscle axis research strongly supports fermented dairy's role in maintaining the microbial diversity that supports muscle health, and the mechanisms are well established. The practical guidance is to think of plain traditional kefir as a genuinely supported dietary strategy for gut microbiome health that connects to your muscles through multiple well-documented pathways. The lactobacillus and related species in kefir repair and strengthen the intestinal barrier. A stronger gut wall is less permeable to bacterial fragments and inflammatory compounds that would otherwise leak into the bloodstream and trigger systemic inflammation. Less systemic inflammation means a more favorable biochemical environment for the muscles in your legs. Additionally, the bacteria in kefir enhance the bioavailability of leucine from the food you eat. Leucine is the specific amino acid that most directly activates muscle protein synthesis, the actual process of building and maintaining muscle fiber. Improving how efficiently your body extracts and uses leucine from dietary protein means that the protein you are already eating does more of the muscle-preserving work it is supposed to do. Here is what most people get completely wrong about kefir. They buy the flavored, sweetened versions in supermarkets that contain added sugar and significantly reduced probiotic counts after pasteurization. The research benefit comes from plain, minimally processed, traditionally fermented dairy kefir. It should taste sour and slightly tangy. If it tastes sweet, it has been processed in a way that degrades the bacterial community responsible for the benefits. Purchase plain, full-fat kefir from a grocery store, natural foods market, or farmer's market. Drink 6 to 8 ounces daily with breakfast. Some people experience mild digestive discomfort in the first week as their gut adjusts. Having a small piece of whole grain bread or half a banana first reduces this for most people. Within 3 to 4 weeks of daily kefir consumption, most seniors notice improvements in digestion first. Less bloating, more regularity, a quieting of the low-grade abdominal discomfort they had accepted as normal. That quieting in the gut is the same biological shift beginning, more slowly and less visibly, in the inflammatory environment surrounding your leg muscles. The gut responds first, the muscles follow. And now, I want to tell you about the most powerful drink on this entire list. The one where the research in older adults specifically, not athletes, not young people, but men and women in their late 60s and 70s, is the most striking thing I have shared with you today. When was the last time your legs genuinely surprised you in a good way? A moment when you moved with more ease than you anticipated, when stairs felt manageable, when you pushed off from a chair and thought, actually, that was fine. Maybe it has been so long you have stopped expecting those moments. I want to tell you about a drink that researchers found could begin restoring that feeling, and the mechanism it works through is the same oral microbiome pathway I introduced at the very beginning of this video. That drink is beetroot juice, specifically concentrated nitrate-rich beetroot juice. Here is what makes it different from any other dietary nitrate source. It contains nitrate concentrations far higher than typical vegetable portions, A single 70 milliliter serving of concentrated beetroot juice provides roughly the same nitrate content as a very large plate of leafy greens. When you drink it, those nitrates travel to your salivary glands, which secrete them into your saliva, where the specific bacteria living on the back of your tongue and in the grooves of your oral tissue reduce them to nitrite. That nitrite enters your bloodstream and travels to your muscles. Inside contracting muscle tissue, where oxygen is low and metabolic demand is high, that nitrite converts to nitric oxide. And nitric oxide does something remarkable in aging muscle specifically. A study published in the journal Nitric Oxide in 2023, examining adults specifically aged 65 to 79, found that short-term beetroot juice supplementation significantly improved muscle speed, which is the maximal velocity at which the leg muscles could complete extension movements, as well as muscle power in the older participants. The researchers noted that the functional improvements they observed were consistent with reversing the effects of approximately 1 to 2 decades of age-related decline in muscle contractile speed and power. For someone who has been hesitating at the top of a staircase, who grips the railing more than they used to, who sits for a moment before trusting their legs to carry them, that kind of functional improvement is not a minor footnote. It is the difference between getting through a day with confidence and getting through it with caution. A separate study examined what happened to the oral microbiome itself after adults in their 70s began daily beetroot juice supplementation. Published research found that after several weeks of nitrate supplementation from beetroot juice, the oral bacterial community measurably shifted in composition, specifically with an increase in nitrate-reducing species like Neisseria. Beetroot juice was not just delivering nitrate, it was gradually cultivating the oral bacterial community needed to convert future dietary nitrates more efficiently. It was improving the system itself. Here is what most people get completely wrong about beetroot juice. They purchase commercially processed, shelf-stable versions that have been heat-treated in ways that significantly reduce nitrate content. Or they drink it occasionally rather than consistently, missing the cumulative oral microbiome effect. Or they use antibacterial mouthwash immediately before or after drinking it, destroying the very oral bacteria that make the conversion possible. Here is exactly how to use it. Purchase concentrated nitrate-rich beetroot juice shots, the small 70 milliliter bottles. Take one concentrated shot, or approximately 140 milliliters of cold-pressed beetroot juice from a refrigerated section each morning, 30 minutes before any physical activity, and before you use any mouthwash. If you currently use antibacterial mouthwash in the morning, shift it to the evening only. Preserve your oral bacteria during the morning hours when you need them most to process the nitrates that feed your muscles. Add a small squeeze of lemon or a splash of citrus to your beetroot juice. Vitamin C significantly increases the stability of the nitrite produced in your saliva, allowing more of it to reach your bloodstream intact. This takes 5 extra seconds and makes a real difference. Drink it at room temperature or slightly cool. Very cold temperature reduces salivary flow slightly, which affects how effectively your mouth processes the nitrate. Within 2 weeks of consistent daily beetroot juice, what you will feel is a change in how your legs respond, specifically during and immediately after movement. Walking upstairs, you may notice your legs feel slightly more willing. Getting up from a seated position, there is less of that moment's hesitation before you commit to the movement. These are not dramatic transformations. They are the beginning of what happens when your muscles receive meaningfully better blood flow and oxygen delivery than they have been getting. Within 4 to 6 weeks of consistent daily use, alongside the reductions you have made from the harmful drinks, many seniors describe a sensation they had nearly forgotten was possible, that their legs feel like their legs again. Not young legs, not the legs of someone who runs marathons, but legs that feel capable, responsive, and present in a way they had quietly accepted was behind them. That sensation is what I want to leave you with when we get to the emotional close of this video. But first, let me give you a practical daily plan that ties all of this together. Let me walk you through exactly what a day looks like when you put all 7 of these changes into practice, not as a list of obligations, as a real daily routine that begins tomorrow morning. When you wake up, before you reach for anything to drink, give yourself 5 quiet minutes. This is not about discipline. It is about allowing the natural bacteria in your mouth to establish their morning baseline before anything acidic or antibacterial disrupts them. Then, with breakfast or within 30 minutes of waking, Take your Montmorency tart cherry juice, 1 tablespoon of concentrate in 8 ounces of water, or a 4-ounce pour of plain, unsweetened, ready-to-drink tart cherry juice. Drink it slowly. This is your morning anti-inflammatory. With or within 1 hour of breakfast, prepare your matcha. 1 teaspoon of good matcha powder, sifted, whisked in water at 170 degrees for about 30 seconds until frothy. Add warm water or oat milk. Drink this as your morning hot beverage, replacing the zero-calorie soda or the second cup of commercially flavored tea, or the sports drink you may currently have in that slot. 30 minutes before any planned physical activity, whether that is your morning walk, gardening, light exercise, or simply the physical activity of your day, take your beetroot juice shot with a squeeze of lemon. This is the drink that prepares your blood vessels for the demands you are about to place on them. If your activity is in the afternoon, shift the beetroot juice to 30 minutes before that instead. With lunch, or as a small early afternoon snack, have your 6 to 8 ounces of plain, full-fat kefir. If the taste is too tart on its own at first, mix it with cucumber and a light sprinkle of dried herbs, or blend it briefly with a small handful of frozen berries. The bacteria survive brief blending, and the berry sugar at that amount is minimal. Throughout the rest of the day, your default drink is water, plain, still, or sparkling, with citrus or cucumber if you enjoy the flavor. Not sports drinks, not diet sodas. Water. This is the foundation that all the other beneficial drinks build upon. 1 hour before bed, take your second dose of tart cherry juice. 1 tablespoon of concentrate in warm water, not cold. This is the dose that most directly supports your sleep quality and the overnight mTOR muscle repair window. This becomes your new evening ritual, the warm drink that marks the transition from the day's demands to genuine rest. If you currently drink wine or another alcoholic beverage most evenings, the work here is gradual. In week 1, maintain your current pattern but cut by 1 evening. In week 2, reduce by 1 more. The target over 4 weeks is no more than 2 evenings of alcohol per week, with a single drink per occasion. This is not about abstinence. It is about protecting the repair window your muscles depend on for the majority of nights. What can you realistically expect across the first month? In weeks 1 and 2, the primary changes are in digestion and sleep. Both respond before the muscles do. Better gut motility, easier sleep onset, fewer night wakings. In weeks 3 and 4, your legs begin to tell you something is changing. Morning stiffness begins to ease. Getting up from chairs becomes slightly less effortful. In weeks 5 through 8, the functional improvements become more consistent. Stairs feel more manageable. Walking feels steadier. The sense of effort required for ordinary movement begins to reduce. This is not a quick fix. Nothing about healthy muscle at 65 or 70 or 75 is quick. But it is real. It is grounded in the biological mechanisms we have covered today. And it belongs entirely to you as soon as you decide to begin. I have been thinking, as I prepared this video, about a patient I saw many years into my practice. A man in his early 70s who came in not because anything had acutely broken or failed, but because he had simply noticed over about 2 years that he was no longer quite himself physically. He had been a gardener for decades. He loved working in his yard, but he had started leaving earlier, finishing less, resting more. Not from pain, from a kind of diffuse, uncategorizable heaviness in his legs that he could not name or explain. He had done everything a responsible older adult is supposed to do. He walked. He watched what he ate. He took his medications. His blood work looked reasonable, and I had almost nothing to offer him from a purely pharmaceutical standpoint. What I did not know then, and what the research of the past several years has made increasingly clear, was that the answer to much of what he was experiencing was in what he was drinking. The daily sports drink he had because he had heard somewhere that electrolytes were important. The diet soda every afternoon because he had given up regular soda. The glass of wine every evening, earned and unquestioned. I think about that conversation, and I wish I could have it differently. I wish I had sat with him the way I am sitting with you today, and explained what we now understand about the drinks that work against the body after 60, and the ones that actively work with it. Now I can, and now you know. Let me close the loops I opened at the beginning of this video. I told you about a morning habit most people believe is completely harmless. That habit is using antibacterial mouthwash first thing in the morning, before breakfast. The research on dietary nitrate and nitric oxide production shows clearly that antiseptic mouthwash use destroys the oral bacteria needed to convert the nitrates from your food into the nitric oxide that feeds your muscles. This is not a failure of hygiene. It is an unintended consequence of a good habit applied at the wrong time. The solution is simple. Shift your mouthwash to the evening only. Let your oral bacteria begin their work alongside your breakfast, undisturbed. This one change, which costs you nothing, preserves a biological system your legs depend on every single day. And the number one protective drink I promised works through that same system. Beetroot juice and the oral microbiome pathway are not separate topics. They are the same story told from two directions. The mouthwash habit was blocking the system. The beetroot juice activates and cultivates it. That is the loop closed. That is the full picture. Here is what I want to leave with you. Not as medical advice, not as a prescription, as one human being to another. You are not fading. Your legs have not simply decided to work less well because of a number on a calendar. The changes you have been feeling have had specific causes, specific, identifiable biological causes. And causes have solutions. The most powerful thing I have seen in 35 years of clinical medicine is not a drug or a procedure. It is a patient who understands what is actually happening in their body and decides to act on that understanding. Not perfectly, not all at once, but specifically and consistently. You watch this entire video. That matters. That means you are exactly that kind of person. The single most important step you can take tonight, not next week, tonight, is to decide which one drink from the avoid list you will begin reducing tomorrow. Just one. Pick the one that is most present in your daily life right now. That is the first act. Everything else we discussed builds from there. Your legs have been waiting for this information. Now you have it. Let me quickly recap everything we covered today so you can remember the full picture. On the avoid side, we have 3 drinks that research connects to the progressive leg weakness most seniors experience after 60. First, artificially sweetened zero-calorie beverages containing aspartame and saccharin, which a 25-year study published in the International Journal of Obesity found were associated with greater accumulation of intermuscular fat independent of diet quality or calories consumed, and which laboratory research suggests disrupt the oral and gut microbial systems that produce nitric oxide for your muscles. Second, commercial sports drinks containing high fructose corn syrup, which elevate uric acid, block endothelial nitric oxide production, and trigger inflammatory cytokine activity inside skeletal muscle tissue, according to published research on fructose and muscle inflammation. Third, regular nightly alcohol, even at moderate levels, which suppresses the mTOR muscle repair pathway, reduces the overnight growth hormone surge that supports muscle maintenance in older adults, and activates myostatin, the protein that limits muscle growth, through well-established biological mechanisms that compound quietly over time. On the protective side, we have 4 drinks that work with your body's biology to begin rebuilding what has been lost. Montmorency tart cherry juice, whose anthocyanins were shown in a University of Delaware randomized controlled trial published in Nutrients in 2019 to reduce C-reactive protein by 25% in older adults aged 65 to 80 over 12 weeks, and which improves sleep quality to extend the nightly muscle repair window. Matcha green tea, whose EGCG compound activates the AMPK and PGC1 alpha pathway for mitochondrial biogenesis in aging muscle cells, and inhibits myostatin through a regulatory pathway demonstrated in published research at Kyoto Prefectural University in 2023. Plain traditional kefir, which supports the gut-muscle axis by repairing the intestinal barrier, reducing the inflammatory cytokine interleukin-1 beta, and improving leucine bioavailability for muscle protein synthesis, with supporting evidence from a 2025 nutrients research trial on kefir-derived postbiotic supplementation. And beetroot juice, standing at the top of the protective list, delivering nitrate through the oral microbiome conversion pathway to produce nitric oxide that meaningfully improves muscle contractile speed and power in adults 65 to 79, according to a 2023 study published in the journal Nitric Oxide. with effects described by the research team as consistent with reversing 1 to 2 decades of age-related functional muscle decline. Now, tell me in the comments below, which one thing from today's video surprised you the most? I genuinely want to know. Your answer helps me understand what to cover next, and it may start a conversation that helps another viewer who is watching this and wondering the same things you were wondering before today. If these videos are useful for your health and the health of people you love, please subscribe right now. Every week I research and share clinical information that most older adults are never given access to, in the brief appointments that are supposed to support their health. You deserve more than that. Subscribing keeps this conversation going. The next video I am preparing addresses something that may be even more directly relevant to your legs than anything we discussed today. It involves a specific time window during the day, approximately 40 minutes long, during which research shows a particular type of movement produces muscle benefits far greater than the same movement performed at any other time. The mechanism involves your circadian biology and the specific hormonal conditions that exist in aging muscle at that particular hour. I believe it will change how you think about when to be active and why. Finally, a word from me as your doctor for the purposes of this video. Nothing I have shared today is medical advice in the clinical sense. Every person watching this has a unique history, a unique set of medications, and a unique set of medical conditions that affect how any dietary change will work for them. Some of the drinks I have recommended today, particularly beetroot juice if you are on blood pressure medication, or tart cherry juice if you take warfarin or other blood thinners, may interact with your current treatment in ways that need to be discussed with your own physician before you begin. Please bring this information to your next appointment. You are worth that conversation, and you deserve a doctor who has time for it. Take good care of your legs. They will carry you everywhere that still matters.